8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Hello, good evening and Happy New Year. It's 6 o'clock on Monday, the first Monday of 2024. I hope you're making the most of it. We've got a cracking show. You saw the New Year's fireworks, more fireworks to come on this show. I'm Dawn Neeson, I'm in for Michelle Dewberry. Right now, let's get on to our stories. The UK Defence Secretary says we won't hesitate to take direct action when it comes to Houthi rebels attacking ships in the Red Sea. Should the UK be getting involved in the Middle East, though? And Reform UK are going on the attack and they now have Labour in their sights. Could Labour lose the next election due to a lack of immigration policy? And a simple question tonight, are we being ripped off? Ofgem have raised the energy price cap up to £1,928. What on earth is going on? Meanwhile, oil companies are making billions of profit. And has Sadiq Khan had a mini ego trip? Another one, I know. His mayoral message in the sky on New Year's Eve has caused a bit of a backlash, and that's putting it mildly. That's all coming up in the next hour with a cracking panel who agree on nothing. But first, let's get the latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Thank you, Dawn. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. A man has died after Japan was hit by several earthquakes, resulting in evacuations and tsunami warnings. Emergency services have been responding to multiple fires and up to 30 collapsed buildings after a 7.6 magnitude quake hit the centre of the country. The man who died was caught up in a building collapse in the Ishikawa region, and a government spokesperson says more people have been trapped beneath the rubble.
As of today, at 6 p.m. local time, there have been numerous calls to the emergency services, and we have confirmed several incidents of collapsed homes following the earlier earthquake. We will continue to make all efforts to gather information in order to identify all injured persons. The specific details are currently unclear, but we have received reports of 6 individuals trapped by collapsed buildings in Ishikawa Prefecture. We do not have information on whether these injuries are related to the tsunami, but the details are currently being confirmed.
Tens of thousands of people have been left without power and evacuation orders remain in place for coastal areas, although all tsunami warnings issued earlier today have been downgraded to an advisory. Smaller tsunami waves have hit the coastline, but no damage has been reported from nuclear power plants along the Sea of Japan. An official from the country's meteorological agency says more earthquakes are expected. A teenage boy who's died after being stabbed at New Year's Eve in London has been named as Harry Pittman. The 16-year-old was pronounced dead shortly before midnight in Primrose Hill, a popular viewpoint where families had gathered to watch the fireworks. A male has been arrested on suspicion of murder and is in police custody. Officers have said Primrose Hill was particularly busy at the time of the incident. A woman accused of murdering 2 of her children in the United States has appeared in a British court. Kimberly Singler's 9-year-old daughter and 7-year-old son were found dead in a residential property in Colorado, along with her 11-year-old daughter, who was injured but alive. The woman initially collaborated with the investigation, but later reportedly disappeared. An arrest warrant was issued for murder charges. She escaped to the UK and was apprehended by the National Crime Agency in West London. Baroness Moan's husband says their family has been treated like a punch bag and hung out to dry. Doug Barrowman says it suits the agenda of the government to scapegoat him and his wife. They're being investigated for their involvement in supplying PPE during the pandemic. Lady Moans admitted she lied when denying connections to MedPro, which made profits of £60 million. Labour's called for Lady Moan to be expelled from the House of Lords. The government says it won't comment on ongoing legal case. Almost 30,000 migrants crossed the Channel to Britain in small boats last year. That's down by almost a third on the number of crossings from 2022, although it's the second largest total since numbers were first published 6 years ago. No attempts to cross the Channel have taken place since mid-December because of bad weather. Average household energy bills will now be almost £100 more expensive. The energy regulator has increased its price cap by 5% in response to rising wholesale prices. Households are urged to submit meter readings to their supplier as quickly as possible to ensure they are charged correctly. Ofgem says suppliers must identify and help those who are struggling with their bills. Thousands gathered on the streets of central London today to ring in the new year with the one and only pop singer Chesney Hawkes greeted spectators along the 2-mile route with dancers and brass bands. Families even witnessed a brief invasion.
Oppa Gangnam Style.
The 2024 parade, which started in 1987, marched from Green Park to the Palace of Westminster. A 20-foot-high balloon police officer was also bobbing along the route, making sure all was in order. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Dawn.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Welcome to Dewbs & Co with me, Dawn Neeson. Joining me until 7 is my brilliant panel tonight, who already started kicking off outside. You're not going to believe it. Conservative for Life peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan, and political commentator Matt Stadlen. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm sitting in between you. I'm going to be the referee, OK?
OK.
Play nice. I have to say, you look very dapper tonight, Daniel, and so do you.
So I try to keep up standards.
Exactly.
Who called whom a pathetic socialist? Or...
We'll have to work that one out.
Yes, OK. It wasn't me, by the way. I'm not calling anyone any names. But it's all about you as well. You can get in touch with us all about whatever we're talking about. gbviews at gbnews.com. Very simple. Or on Twitter at gbnews. Very, very easy indeed. And we want to hear what you've got to say. Now, I want to start with a story that I thought was quite scary today, and I wasn't really aware of it. The UK Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, has said the UK will not hesitate to take direct action over cargo ship attacks in the Red Sea. The US has already sunk boats operated by Houthi rebels, with war raging in Gaza and the Houthis operating in the Red Sea. Should the UK be getting involved, though? Now, this is the front page of The Telegraph today, and I wasn't aware of it. I don't know why I wasn't aware of it, because, I mean, it sounds like we should all be aware of it. So basically, we've got France, the UK and USA have all got warships in the Red Sea at the moment, and these rebels, who are backed by Iran, are attacking ships going through the Red Sea. And our warship, HMS Diamond, shot down an attack drone in self-defence in December, just a few weeks ago. I wasn't even aware this was happening. And it's the first time our Navy has shot down an aerial target in anger in more than 30 years. Daniel, I'm going to come to you first. What's going on here? Am I right to be as nervous as I am about what's going on here?
Well, first of all, the Houthis are from Yemen. We're not attacking Yemen. We're not attacking the country or the government, because the Houthis are not the government of Yemen. They're a rebel group that have been waging civil war there for a long time, and it's been very, very disastrous for the local population. There's been foreign intervention, but not from Britain. There's been foreign intervention in the civil war. But what they're doing now is straightforward piracy. They're just behaving like pirates.
Right.
They're seizing and they're attacking commercial vehicles, unarmed, quite rightly, unarmed commercial vehicles, commercial vessels rather, going through those narrow waters, which are a very important lifeline for global trade and prosperity. And the Royal Navy has a very long tradition, going back 200 years or more, of protecting the world from pirates. And I think it's absolutely right we should be there. Now, of course, we're only a very small part of a large American-led force, but we are supporting them, and we're working with them, and it's quite right that we should do that.
I mean, evidently I wasn't aware. I don't know why I wasn't aware. Maybe it's Christmas, maybe it's New Year, maybe you are all aware of it and it's just me being thick. But, I mean, attacks by these rebels have been escalating from 3 in November to 20 in December, and as you've just said, Daniel, they're on cargo ships that are either UK registered, have Brits in the crews, or carry goods into the UK. I mean, should we be getting involved in military action here, though? Surely there's some diplomacy route we can go down first?
I don't think that you can get involved in much diplomacy with these guys. These are not good guys.
No, I got the impression they weren't.
And to be very clear from the outset, they're doing this, or they're saying they're doing this because they support Hamas.
Yes.
Interestingly, and I hope I haven't got this the wrong way round, the Houthi rebels are Sunni and Hamas are Shia. And Iran is Shia as well. Again, I hope I haven't got it the wrong way around. And Iran is backing these rebels, as Daniel said. Actually, we have been involved in this terrible civil war in Yemen because we've, at times, I think, had men in the room involved in the Saudi-led coalition that has been trying to get on top of these rebels. So the Saudi-led coalition is on the side of the Yemeni government. It's a dirty, dirty civil war. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed. There's been either the risk of or actual famine in Yemen. It's a total tragedy what's happened there. But yes, we should be getting involved because this is a critical trading route where I think something like 12% of global trade goes through it. It leads, I think, eventually to the Suez Canal. We all know how important that is strategically for trade. Remember the Suez crisis that cost a British Prime Minister his job back in the 1950s. So we should be getting involved, but we should also be open-minded about the risks of getting involved, because if we attack these rebels, there is, in my mind...
Who are backed by Iran.
Yeah, there's both the risk of inflaming tensions between the West and Iran, but also back here, there's obviously a greater chance of domestic terrorism.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel, it's... Obviously, you can't talk to, as you've described them, pirates. There's no... Maybe there is no way to get around this situation without taking military action. But it could all escalate, couldn't it?
Well, we're living in... I think, as Matthew says, we're in danger of agreeing on this. As Matthew says, this needs to be seen in the broader picture as well. And, of course, it is tied into the Gaza situation and the war that's going on there between Israel and Hamas.
Because, I mean, the attacks have gone up so much in the last month.
Iran has activated another one of its players on the board. And there is a risk of escalation, and that's been present right from the beginning, going back to October the 7th. In fact, escalation is what Hamas was seeking to provoke, I reckon, when they undertook the attacks back in October. So there is a risk of escalation, and things are a bit dangerous. But the alternative is you just either the vessels will stop sailing. That's essentially what's going to happen.
Well, there are 2 shipping lines that are already actually diverting their ships away from the area.
They won't be able to get insured, for one thing. So the vessels will stop sailing, and that part of global trade will come to an end, all because of a handful of rebels with some toy drones that happen to be loaded up with armaments. So not toy drones, but I mean small drones. Now, if we give in to that and let that happen, then I think we're sunk, really. It's a massive...
If it happens there, I think Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary's argument would be, well, it can happen in the South China Sea.
This is what I was going to say, absolutely, because if we don't do anything, don't get involved, then what message is it sending to, say, China and the South China Sea?
Being no doubt that while these attacks by the rebels are escalating, it risks global prices, and we're already in a cost of living crisis. I think the wider geopolitical context is really important, and Iran is involved in this massive proxy war with Saudi Arabia. Sunni Saudi Arabia, Shia Iran, and they don't go head to head, but what they do is they're fighting it out on different battlefields, and the main battlefield is Yemen. But Iran has these sort of toy soldiers it positions around the place. They've got them in Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, which is a big risk to Israel. They've got them in the form of the Houthi rebels and elsewhere. Make no mistake, Iran is a massive threat to the stability of the region.
So should we stop tiptoeing around all this and then just do something about the problem that is Iran?
Well, we've tried doing something about the problem that is Iran, first of all, by narrowly defining the problem, which is to say we don't want them to have nuclear weapons. And secondly, by entering a punitive regime of sanctions, alternating with the release of those sanctions if they stop doing their nuclear weapons program. And we've had different approaches, therefore, from the Obama administration, which was more, let's do a deal and they'll give up their their program to achieve nuclear weapons. We don't think they've got nuclear weapons yet, but they've got a program for developing.
The fact that we don't know is slightly worrying.
Well, we probably do know, I think, but not with absolute certainty. I think that's the difficulty with any of these countries. So it seems they haven't got the nuclear weapons yet, but they have a program for getting them, and they give that up. And then, of course, you had a different approach with Trump, and now with Biden. And so people don't know how to play Iran. The truth is that the Iranian people, I think, are going to have to deal themselves, ultimately, with a government which clearly many of them find irksome and some of them actually completely rebarbative. They have a very young population in Iran, which has no recollection of the revolution that got rid of the Shah.
I was going to say, yeah, absolutely.
And they're living in conditions which many of them, as I say, find pretty irksome, and they're not very happy about it. But it's a very repressive regime and very vicious if it takes against you. And we know how it treats its own people.
Israel also feels very, very threatened by Iran. And this is...
Understandably so,
This is a big thing on Netanyahu's mind. Not that I'm remotely a fan of Netanyahu. So the Middle East, since October the 7th, has been a tinderbox. And what we saw was massive American shuttle diplomacy. You saw a president of the United States visit Israel during war. His Secretary of State, of course, Blinken there.
Several visits, hasn't Blinken made?
Lots and lots of visits. And they were desperate, I think, to make sure that this didn't escalate into another war between Israel and Lebanon. You remember the devastation of the 2006 war. But how to deal with Iran, as Daniel says, the Western approach does seem to have been mixed and confused. It's a very repressive regime. We shouldn't forget, by the way, that Saudi Arabia is a very repressive regime as well. But these are two behemoths smashing at each other, and you've got Israel there in the mix, so it is a highly inflammatory situation.
It's horrible, isn't it? Well, I don't know what the answer is,
but... going on, I just want a slight historical note. It's been going on for thousands of years.
Oh, yes, of course.
I mean, there's been a war. It used to be between Saudi Arabia. Arabia didn't have any weight in the world. Anyone didn't even notice it until it discovered oil.
Oil, yeah.
So it used to be between Egypt and the Persians, Persians are the Iranians of today. And they were always fighting over the Middle East, or what we call the Middle East, and over Mesopotamia and Palestine and whatever we call them now, what we call them nowadays, you know, and those areas. They've been fighting over them for at least 2,000 years.
OK, well, we're not going to solve it in 15 minutes tonight, are we, unfortunately? Right, well, and you've agreed on something.
We have.
At least I found something you can agree on.
But the really important thing for viewers, I think, is that this conflict involves our cost of living.
Yes, it does. Well, absolutely. Of course, everything involves our cost of living at the moment. Talking of which, a seamless link. Could Labour actually lose the next election if they don't spell out their immigration plan? Does Keir Starmer even have one? And will he tell us what it is if he does? Don't go anywhere. Lots more coming up.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This is Dewbs & Co with me, Dawn Neeson. Joining me until 7 is my panel, Conservative Life peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan, and political commentator Matthew Stadlen. Now, let's talk about things closer to home, shall we? Actually, no, before we do that, I'm going to read some of your messages. You're getting your messages coming in on the debate we've just had about what's going on in the Red Sea and should we get involved military-wise. David, good evening, David, says, do we ever learn getting involved with Middle East wars? We must keep out of as we always end up with the consequences. I thought people would feel like that. I mean, even though we've explained that what message do we send out if we don't get involved, certainly to China. Meanwhile, Mark, you agree with David. No, we shouldn't get involved in this. We, the British public, did not vote for this, along with supplying arms to Ukraine.
We did vote for British interests to be protected, though. And
yes.
There's no doubt that our interests are being negatively impacted.
This absolutely, and it will affect us all personally because of the.
And when they talk about being affected by when Dave talks about being affected by the consequences, the idea is if we don't get involved in this modest way, supporting the Americans, that they'll leave us alone.
That's not going to happen, is it? No. No.
If you don't stand up to bullies, we know what happens. Yeah,
doing nothing is not an option in this case, is it? Right, OK, let's move on. The leader of Reform, Richard Tice, has said that the Tories are a smoking wreck and that their attention will turn to Labour and lack of an immigration policy. So, could this be Labour's Achilles heel, one of many, some might think, at the next general election? Now, Keir Starmer did actually come up with some sort of game plan on immigration the other day, something about offshore processing, but didn't quite explain what shore he was talking about being off or who was going to do the processing, indeed. So, let's come to you first on this one, Matthew. Are Labour, under Keir Starmer, in trouble from A, reform, and B, because of their immigration policy?
I think it's a very interesting way to frame the question. I'll be absolutely clear on this.
Go on, be absolutely clear, Matthew. That's what we want.
The idea that Labour is going to lose this election on immigration when the Tories, in the eyes of voters, have failed again and again on immigration is absurd. It's the Conservatives and Rishi Sunak whose policies simply haven't worked. And they
at least they have a policy.
You say they have a policy. They have a policy that doesn't work, that is expensive. We've had more Home Secretaries go to Rwanda than asylum
yeah,
seekers.
it's a standing joke
Everyone
now, isn't
understands, even if there might be broad support for the idea of it, and I don't support it on ethical grounds, no one supports it in terms of its competence, because it is an incompetent, legally leaky policy, and it is a flagship policy that is seen to fail again and again. I think it's the Conservatives who are under threat from reform. I suspect that quite a few people who are fed up with this government, just as Richard Tice's and Nigel Farage are, want to punish the Tories. And they probably broadly see Labour and the Conservatives as similar. And the electoral threat is to the right. It's not to Starmer.
Well, this is what John Cruddas, who's a Labour grandee, has come out and said that, you know, people don't know the difference between Labour and Conservatives these days. Richard Tice has said the same thing. So politically, those two people are poles apart, but they are both saying that Starmer and Sunak are pretty much on the same hymn sheet with most of their policies. I mean, do Labour have an immigration policy, Daniel?
Well, not that I'm aware of. I mean, Keir Starmer did a New Year message in which he said we have a plan.
Yes,
we have a plan not just for immigration, we have a plan that's going to solve all our problems and there'll be no cost to it, no downside to it. But he hasn't said what the plan is. Now, OK, all right, cut him some slack. He wouldn't want to do that too far ahead of a general election. But what's going to be really, really interesting, and it won't just be Reform looking at this, it'll be the press generally, is that this is going to be the first election in decades where all parties, but both main parties, will have to be very clear what their immigration policies are and how they can deliver them, with no excuse that it's all down to we can't do it because of the European Union. And Labour is going to be scrutinised very, very heavily about that, and they have got to be, if they want to win, they have got to be credible. And Keir Starmer has one chance, Rishi Sunak has one chance left to rescue this and make it a vote winner, and that is to get the legislation through in the next few weeks, next couple of months.
The Rwanda legislation.
The Rwanda legislation that would allow him to start shipping people to Rwanda and see a fall in the number of boats
but it's a nonsense,
arriving.
Isn't it, guys?
And look, Matthew, I didn't interrupt you. And he's got one chance to get this right. He may not get it right. He may not get this legislation through. But if he does get it through and it starts to deliver, then Labour is going to be seriously on the back foot, because Matthew's complained that the government has failed to deliver the policy, which is true so far. That complaint will have been taken away. They've been taken off the table. So the terms of the debate, the terms of trade, will change very rapidly if he does get that through.
OK, could I just respond to that? Listen, first of all, on the Conservatives, the policy won't work, partly because even if it gets through the courts, even if a flight does eventually take off before the election, I think it's highly unlikely one will take off before May if there's a spring election, and I think it's unlikely one will take off before the autumn. Even if it does, tiny numbers, relatively tiny numbers...
Tiny numbers act as a deterrent.
Tiny numbers... I don't think it will act as much.
Well, that's the whole purpose of it.
But tiny numbers will end up in Rwanda. So he is a hostage to his own fortune. He said at the beginning of last year, didn't he, and I keep making this point because it's an important one, he said he would stop the boats by the end of 2023, and he didn't.
But they are down. Numbers are down.
Yeah, that's not what he said.
Numbers
he said
are crossing.
He stopped the boats, and 2/3 are still coming over. On Labour, I think this is really interesting and important. It is absolutely not the case that Labour are soft on immigration or indeed on asylum. Yes, we need a certain amount of immigration. We desperately need it in health and social care. Yes, we should take a number of asylum seekers. Of course we should, so we can hold our heads up high. But the idea that Yvette Cooper is some sort of softie, the idea that David Blunkett, when he was Home Secretary, was a softie on these things, absolute nonsense. And we've learned recently that the new Labour government was considering, talking about the idea of offshoring asylum claims when they were in power. So it's a myth that Labour are going to be soft. I think they will.
Tony Blair did.
I think they will be tough, actually. And above all, I hope, and I can't guarantee it, but I hope they will be competent, or more competent than this government.
It's very interesting that Keir Starmer, I mean, you know, he's not actually doing as well as he should be. He's constantly had an open goal with the way the Conservatives have messed things up. No offence, I know you're a Tory peer, but with the way there are still so many constituencies around the country that are undecided, which must be good news for the Tories.
Well, I don't know if it's quite as good news as it could be, and I think Keir Starmer is putting in a competent performance as leader of the Labour Party. I think it's a really interesting question whether he's taking the Labour Party as a whole with him is a separate story, a separate question. But I think he's doing a reasonably competent job. The difficulty is that he remains a wooden and unattractive figure who hasn't actually inspired people. He hasn't inspired the emotional affection of people or that attraction which other characters have been able to do. And that is weighing to some extent against him. As to Matthew's point about Labour not being soft on immigration, that may be true. That may turn out to be true. But until we see that plan,
we don't know,
and have the chance to scrutinise how it's going to work, it's just it's just Matthew's
this
opinion.
Starmer point, Dawn, I think it's a really interesting point that Daniel makes. And I mean, does he inspire us, Keir Starmer? I'm broadly on the left. I'd like to see a Labour government. I couldn't vote for Labour under Jeremy Corbyn. No, he doesn't inspire me. But after how many prime ministers have we had since the last election alone? 3. The country is crying out for someone who's a bit dull and rather competent.
But also someone who has the courage. We're on the GB News political poll. We had our end-of-year poll. The 3 former prime ministers that people would like to see back in number 10. Margaret Thatcher was number 1, Winston Churchill was number 2, and Tony Blair was number 3. And the thing they all had in common was the courage of their convictions, an optimistic message.
There's a very interesting poll, and I think it was done in November, of about 10,000 people, and it seemed to be constituency by constituency. And there's been some talk or some idea that Rishi Sunak wanted to run this election as a popularity contest, as a sort of...
Almost like a presidential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what we've found is that Starmer is ahead of Sunak. Whether you call him popular or not is a different question, but he is ahead of Sunak in 390 constituencies, and Sunak is ahead in about 29.
Yeah, but
that tells you so much.
238 still undecided. I mean, you would have thought that if Tories were doing such a bad job, that everyone would go, well,
Hang on, 390 compared to 29 is massive.
Yeah, I know, but there are 238 who still are not convinced by what Keir Starmer
He needs to do more. He needs to do more. We need to know more about where he's coming from. I would just say this. I think he will find it easier than Conservative prime ministers to deal with Europe, because they know that he was coming from a Europhile
Well, because he was conspiring with them against the country.
Use the word conspiring.
He was popping over to Brussels the whole time to have secret deals with them, secret talks with them.
The point I'm making, let's not revisit Brexit. The point I'm making
but that's what he was doing.
Just one at a time,
That's what he was doing. That's why they like him.
The practical, real-world effect, whether you voted for Brexit, as Daniel did, or whether you voted for Remain, as I did, that debate is largely done. The point I'm making is, on a personal chemistry level, I think Starmer has a better chance of getting concessions from the French on things like small boat crossings.
Why? Why do you think that?
Than Sunak. Because he comes from a Europhile background in a way that Sunak certainly doesn't and Johnson didn't.
So implying, Daniel, that getting back into bed with Europe again is going to help our immigration problem?
Yeah, I don't think the French have any interest in dealing... I think one of the most amusing things I'm looking forward to is, if Labour win, is Keir Starmer turning up in Brussels with lots of trumpets, it'll all be well prepared, saying, look, Ursula, he'll say, it's me, it's Keir, your old mate, your co-conspirator.
All right, how you doing?
You know, I used to be around here the whole time working with you against Britain, and it's me, I'm back. You're going to give me lots of concessions, and find out that he's getting no more out of the European Union because of their very legalistic approach than anybody else is going to get. It's a fantasy to think that there's somebody out there who's willing to be nice in the European Union, who wants to be nice to Britain just because it's Keir Starmer in charge. Absolute fantasy.
We've got
and he'll come back with his tail between his legs.
The realm sitting in the GB News studio talking about the future Prime Minister of this country conspiring against British interests.
That's what he was. That's what he was doing. He was working against the British government.
It's like cold potatoes.
No, it's not.
It's toxic and it's nonsense. The idea that Starmer was conspiring
against Britain... And it's not about
Britain
Brexit.
Is utter rubbish.
It's all very well saying the Brexit vote is in the past, that's decided, which I agree with. That is the case.
Oh, God.
But this is what my remark is not about Brexit. My remark is about the disgraceful behaviour of a small number of members of Parliament, mostly from the Labour Party, not all of them, a small number of members of Parliament who are working to undermine their own government's position consistently with a view to getting the vote reversed. And he was the leader of that on the Labour side. He was absolutely in the forefront of that. And there are voters who will never forgive him for that. You may not be. I'm not accusing you.
One at a time. We're running out of time. Quickly, Matthew.
Very quick. I was not someone who thought that we should rerun that vote. I thought it would be disastrous for this country and disastrous for their faith in democracy.
Right,
but the idea that Starmer was conspiring against British interests is simply untrue.
That's how people saw it at the time, and many of them still see it that way. And that is one of the reasons that he's not as popular as he might be.
Oh, and actually, just quickly to finish this one off, young people aged 18 to 25 think Jeremy Corbyn will be a better leader than Keir Starmer. And they are the future, obviously. Thank you very much. Well, that got feisty, didn't it? Right, now we move on. And there's still more of this to come. These two are brilliant, aren't they? The energy price cap has risen to £1,928. It's a simple question we're asking. Are we being ripped off? Stay tuned. Put the kettle on, but don't go too far.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
This is Dewbs & Co with me, Dawn Neeson. Welcome back. Joining me until 7, my panel, brilliant panel, they are very feisty. Conservative life peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan, and political commentator Matt Stadlen. And, of course, you're the important people. Loads of messages coming in. Thank you so much. In particular, Carla. Hi, Carla. Good evening. Please tell Dawn that her teal blazer is absolutely gorgeous and classy. I love it. Thank you very much. Got a matching highlighter as well, which is a bit sad, Carla, I guess.
Daniel has a matching orange... Is it a rim of your suitcase with the orange tie?
Well, the lining of, the lining of the jacket.
We are team
purely by chance.
Yeah,
I'm team orange.
Daniel is, and Daniel also has a matching scarf and gloves outside, which I've seen. And Matthew, you know, What did you call him earlier?
Matthew, for a socialist, is extremely well dressed.
Yeah.
First of all, I've never seen him in a tie. Secondly, it's an Hermes tie, the most expensive tie.
But you know why this is? It's because I'm married to a Tory, and she dresses me.
And she dresses you, right. Well, she's
well, there you go. That proves it. Right, and we're going back to the Red Sea debate we're having earlier on. We can shoot down pirates with drones, but we can't return a rubber dinghy. That's a very fair point, isn't it? And on immigration and the Labour Party, Alan, good evening. The Labour Party has no plan to stop the boats, and Chris says the Tories have failed on immigrants because everything they have tried to do is stopped by lawyers. And it has to be said, the Labour Party, probably. Right, OK, should we move on to something? Oh, no, it's not. It's not more exciting. It's more depressing, to be honest with you. But we're going to have a great debate about it. Ofgem have implemented a 5% increase in the price cap starting today, the 1st of January, the coldest part of the year. It's now £1,928 in a cost of living crisis. But with so many people struggling to pay their bills and oil companies making record profits, is it really necessary, or are energy companies just being greedy and profiteering from our misery? What do you reckon to this one, Daniel?
Well, first of all, the fact that it's a cap tells you that if you didn't have the cap, the prices would be higher than they are with the cap. Otherwise, it's totally pointless having a cap. So the cap in itself is actually protecting people to some extent from the full force of market prices. And so to that extent, although it's going up by 5%, it is still offering a degree of protection. So I don't see how you can say you're being ripped off if you're benefiting from a cap that is keeping prices down. You might be very angry about how much you're paying, but I don't think it means you're being ripped off. And just on the point about oil companies, there are different types of oil companies. And there are oil companies that produce oil, and there are people who distribute oil, and then there's the company like, you're paying British Gas or whatever it is, you're paying for your electricity and your gas supply, which will come from oil. Some of it will come from oil in the first place. The people who are really making profits out of this are the people who are producing oil, because that's where the price has gone up. The people further downstream, like the British Gases and whatever, they're not getting any benefit out of that particularly. So I think you need to be very careful and nuanced when you talk about, the energy companies making a fortune out of this. It's some do and some don't.
So yeah, some are struggling.
And most of the ones who do are not British. They're companies like, they're the Russians, they're the Arabians, and they're people like that. So it's no good us saying we've got to take them down or whatever. We have no power over them. They can charge what they want on global
the big 5 oil companies who start this chain, BP, Shell, Chevron, ExxonMobil and Total Energies, are expected to reward investors with payouts of more than £79 billion for 2023. And Ofgem, their reason is to protect consumers. It doesn't feel like they're doing a very good job.
I mean, my instinct is it doesn't feel like they're doing a very good job. But they are the regulator, so they should be doing a good job. And am I in a better position than the national regulator to get this right? I can't claim to be. But
Go on, have a go.
But it's astonishing that the typical annual household bill will increase from already £1,834 to £1,928.
And that's just the average, by the way. I mean, a lot of people are paying a lot more than that.
It's a rise of £94, and I think few people, or many people in this country, few people can afford that, but many people in this country simply can't afford that rise. I mean, we remember it wasn't that long ago that Rishi Sunak, I think when he was Chancellor, was offering us rebates, wasn't he? And I think there probably are some targeted rebates at the moment, but it won't be enough for a lot of people. This cost of living crisis is ongoing. Yes, inflation has come down, but don't forget interest rates haven't come down. So people are still really feeling the pinch. I mean, people are acting. We talk about the boats the whole time, but this is what really impacts people's lives. And just take my household, right? So I'm relatively well off. This is not a disaster, but it's painful. But this winter, we've kept our blinds closed a lot of the time. Luckily, it's been quite mild.
Well, what have you been getting up to?
Dawn.
Sorry.
Not the time, not the place.
Sorry.
No, but we have, and the reason is because our windows are not very well insulated.
Yeah.
Part of this story is, everyone got so angry with Insulate Britain, and I'm not encouraging law breaking.
No,
but
please
actually, they
don't.
had a point on the substance of it. We need to insulate our homes because they are leaking a huge amount of warmth because our windows aren't good enough. And so actually, when you do keep the blinds shut for a while, which is not nice because you want to have the sunlight coming in, not that there's been much of it.
There hasn't been any.
Actually, it keeps it warmer inside. And we are going to have to do better at insulating our homes because these prices are unsustainable. And just one final point. It does take us back to where we started this programme, which is what's going on in the Red Sea with the Houthi rebels.
Yes.
Because that sort of thing does impact or can impact oil prices, and we can feel it in our pockets.
Well, that's, I mean, Ofgem is saying the cap has had to increase because of what's happening to the oil prices with the situation in the Middle East and obviously Russia invading Ukraine. But I do feel that, you know, why do it now? Why increase the cap now? Why not wait?
Well, I think they have to review it every 6 months.
It is. I think they change it every 3-4 months. Is it
3 or 4 months?
Yeah.
Or whatever. But periodically, they
yes, yeah, they do.
It because otherwise, if the price cap, you know, there is. Theresa May introduced this price cap. Now, you could ask whether it's a good idea or not in the first place, to be frank. But it was never meant to be a really serious, heavy price cap like Macron introduced, because the more heavily you bear down upon the price, the more you have to make up the difference from taxpayer money. And we've run out of taxpayer money to do that. And we have too much debt already. So it was never meant to be a really heavy price cap that crashed down the price to make it... so it needs to be reviewed periodically. That's why they're doing it now. And it's not the best time to do it, I agree. But there will always be a review. You know, if you do it every 3 or 4 months, one of those reviews will be in the winter.
But someone has to pay, ultimately, is what you're saying. And it's either the taxpayer or it's households with their energy bills.
Who are the same thing, basically.
Well, except that would make an argument for taxing the better off more than we do at the moment, and we are relatively undertaxed, even though we've got this huge tax burden, apparently, and as a percentage of GDP, that's true, I believe. But compared to some European countries, we are relatively undertaxed. And if you had a brave politician, and by the way, I don't think Keir Starmer is a brave politician.
No.
But if you had a brave politician, you'd say, listen, if you want, you don't get nothing. You don't get anything for nothing. If you want good public services, or if you want cheaper bills, someone somewhere in this country is going to have to put their hand in their pocket.
Can I just say, Dawn, I really welcome the true voice of Labour Party policy as represented by the well-to-do socialist voter in London. We're undertaxed. The solution is more tax. That is what you're going to get.
Tax people like me more.
That is what you're going to get.
What's better? What do you
that
want?
is what you're going to get.
And do you want people
that
in
is
this
what you're
country?
going to get.
Okay, let me answer that.
If Labour come
one
back
at a time,
to power.
gentlemen.
Do you
we
want
are
people
undertaxed. Remember that phrase? We are undertaxed. You first heard it here.
I say undertaxed. I'm talking about the well-off. And those with the broadest shoulders should pay more, because otherwise, Daniel, what you're advocating for is a society where many people watching this programme, people up and down the country who might very well be on low incomes or not on any income at all, they might be retired, they might be pensioners, are having to pay extortionate amounts.
We know what happened.
Let me finish the point. They're having to pay extortionate amounts to heat their homes. If you want to live in a fairer society, you have to have higher taxes.
We know what happens when you put up taxes on the middle classes. Many of them stop working. They go part-time. That's why one of the reasons we don't have enough doctors is that many of them have gone part-time.
You think middle-class workers
absolutely.
are going to
You're
say,
already,
right, we're going on the
when
dole,
you get over 100,000, not on the dole, when you go over 100,000 a year, you're paying tax at 62%. A lot of people say that's not worth it. That's
unfortunately, gentlemen,
many of them are GPs.
As much as I'm loving this debate, it's brilliant. We have to move on. Sorry. We're running out of time.
We are undertaxed.
New Year's Eve. Happy New Year, by the way. I hope you're having a lovely Monday and enjoying the fireworks in the studio. But New Year's Eve, a time for everyone to come together and ring in the new year, not a time for the Mayor of London to show off and make it all about him. This one's going to get more fireworks going as well. See you soon.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This is Dewbs & Co with me, Dawn Neeson. Joining me until 7, my panel, Conservative Life peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan, and political commentator Matthew Stadlen. Now, thank you for all your messages. It's not just about these two, although they try and make it is, but it's about you. All your messages coming in, thank you. Do keep them coming up. And going back to the Ofgem conversation we're just having, Ofgem, this is Lee. Good evening, Lee. Lee says, Ofgem is working for the energy companies rather than consumers. It was set up to protect. They are a disgrace. And Rob says the Tory government is being silent on this energy cap increase. I used to think that Ofgem was safeguarding energy prices for the public. Not anymore. Not a lot of fans in them.
It's difficult to disagree with that sentiment, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even
You
when
feel
none
like...
of us are energy experts, but it feels like something isn't going quite right.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels any case. Should we talk fireworks?
Yeah.
You're already providing fireworks, so let's talk more fireworks. And the Mayor of London. Indeed, the Mayor of London presents. That was the message that lit up the London sky before the New Year's Eve fireworks show kicked off. Was it really necessary? It's New Year's Eve. Did Sadiq Khan have to claim ownership over communal celebrations that were paid for by, oh yes, the London taxpayers? Did it leave a bitter taste, though, Matthew? I must admit, it did with me. I got a bit fed up with it.
So
what do you reckon?
I was in bed for the first time in my adult life at midnight because I had to get up early to do some TV.
Implying that you are actually an adult?
Well, yeah, there you are. Yeah. But I have since watched these fireworks.
OK.
The fireworks were spectacular.
They were?
Absolutely beautiful and brilliant. And personally, I would have left it at that.
Yeah.
And I'm not someone who gets triggered by messages of inclusivity. I think fantastic. We're a great capital city. We should be proud of our city. Yes, we've got some problems and they need to be ironed out, to say the least. But we're a wonderful centre for both those who live here and people coming from abroad. So no problem with that. Did I think it was necessary for Sadiq Khan to name-check himself? No.
I mean, we've got the mayoral elections coming up in May, I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I bet he'd never thought of that.
No, never crossed his mind.
Never have crossed
his mind. It's a shameless self-promotion, isn't it, basically?
Yeah, well, I was there watching last night in person because I've never done it before.
Oh, you were there?
And I probably never did it again. And they have these drones come up, and they're absolutely
amazing.
spectacular. And then all of a sudden they resolve into something about the Mayor of London Presents. And there was a huge groan around me. I mean, everyone just sort of expected of him. It's very telling. Right from the moment he was mayor, I was just saying in the break, there's a logo for the Mayor of London, and it says Mayor of London. And it was used by Ken, and it was used by Boris. And it's on all the TfL posters and things like that. And the moment Sadiq Khan came in, it was all changed to Mayor of London Sadiq Khan. Is the first mayor to put himself in his own logo. Nobody else had done that before, neither Ken nor Boris. And because that self-promotion has been there the whole time, every poster is for him an opportunity to...
Because Boris Johnson never self-promoted.
Promote himself.
Boris Johnson, your mate Boris, never self-promoted.
He didn't change the logo.
Not using public funds, not using public funds. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
The use of public funds, those drones were paid for by the London taxpayer to promote a candidate in the election, I think was pretty disgraceful, and most people moaned about it.
The thing that really triggers people like Daniel and some viewers is that Sadiq Khan is going to win again.
Well, that is what I expect to hear, not facing the argument.
Well, if he doesn't...
From Mr Matthew We Are Undertaxed Stadlong, speaking on behalf of the Socialist Labour Party, which is in conspiracy, whose leader used to be in conspiracy with Brussels. That's exactly the sort of nonsense I expect to hear. What triggers me is the abuse of public funding. That's what worries most people.
I wouldn't say it's a massive abuse of public funding, but was it
not the worst?
Was it a little narcissistic? Yes,
it's not the worst.
Talking about narcissism, my greatest moment on a cricket pitch, and as a member of the establishment, such as yourself, Lord Boyd, and you will appreciate this, was I was playing for the press against the Houses of Parliament in the annual match, and I smacked Sadiq Khan back over his head, either for a lofted 4 or a 6, I can't remember which. It was very satisfying.
He's probably never forgiven you.
I think we have to go, unfortunately. The one thing I wanted to make about the fireworks is that Sadiq Khan was saying that it's a place for everyone, provided you're carrying a knife, because at the same time, a 16-year-old child lost his life to a stabbing incident, and that's a lot last year. Thank you so much, my brilliant panel, Daniel Moylan, Matthew Stadlon. Next up is the brilliant Nigel Farage, so don't go too far. Thank you for watching.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here for GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. 2023 was a wetter than average year for the vast majority of us, and 2024 has started off on a relatively similar theme. We've got this band of rain sweeping its way across the majority of the UK. We'll start falling as snow over higher ground areas of Scotland as it pushes into colder air ahead of it. Some travel disruption is possible overnight with strong winds developing across southern coastal areas of England and for Shetland and Orkney as well. Temperatures in the south will be relatively mild, dropping down to around 11-12 degrees Celsius, but some frost is possible for Scotland first thing on Tuesday. That band of rain will push its way northwards, eventually stalling across the far northern Isles. Other southern eastern areas should see some brighter spells developing for the bank holiday here, but there's more rain on the cards for England, Wales, perhaps into the far southeast of Northern Ireland, eventually spreading into the far south of Scotland as well. So some localised flooding is possible during Tuesday. Temperatures generally ranging between 8 and 13 degrees Celsius, but probably feeling colder due to the strength of the winds. One of those areas of low pressure does eventually clear its way off towards the continent, but we've got another one that is lingering to northwest of the UK as we head into Wednesday, still with some persistent rainfall for parts of Shetland and Orkney, some strong gales here as well. Further brisk westerly winds pushing in showers for the rest of the UK. Most of those showers frequent in the west and heavy at times, some brighter spells perhaps for eastern areas. Showers turning fewer and further between as we head to the second half of the week. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB.